Have you ever thought like this? That there is no difference between sons and daughters, and as long as they are treated fairly from childhood, they will grow up to be sensible and filial to their parents, with no significant distinction? I believe everyone has had such an experience. When we were young, our parents always taught us to treat others fairly and love each child equally. Often, we also believed that as long as parents were fair, their children would naturally grow up to be considerate and take care of them. However, it is only when we truly experience old age and illness that we realize fairness does not necessarily guarantee equal returns. Today's story is about a 68-year-old mother. Throughout her life, she adhered to the principle of fair treatment, showing no favoritism or comparison, and did her utmost to raise her son and daughter to be capable individuals. Yet, after an unexpected accident, she discovered that the fairness she had always deeply believed in ultimately resulted in two completely different ways of being treated. This difference was related to her children, but more importantly, it also involved someone she had never considered. Let's take a look at her story. Perhaps one day in the future, you too will face a similar dilemma. The mother and her husband had a son and a daughter. The son was the eldest, now 40 years old, and the daughter was 38. I am 68 this year, and my husband is 5 years older than me. Although we are still in relatively good health, we are not as strong as we were in our youth. We have a son and a daughter. The son is the eldest, now 40, and the daughter is the youngest, now 38. When the children were young, my husband and I shared a common principle: absolutely no favoritism. Even though, in our era, there was a widespread belief in society that daughters would eventually marry and become part of another family, while sons were the hope of the family and deserved more nurturing and care. But my husband and I firmly disagreed with this view. We felt that sons and daughters were both our flesh and blood. Why should we treat them differently? From the time they were young, we consistently upheld the principle of fairness. If we bought our son a pair of sneakers, we would take our daughter to pick out clothes she liked. When school started, if our son got a new backpack, our daughter would definitely get one too. When we gave our son pocket money, we made sure to give our daughter the same amount. We weren't particularly enlightened. We just believed that, as parents, the most basic thing was to have a clear conscience. I was the eldest daughter in my family. When I was a child, I watched my younger brother eat meat, while I could only drink soup. That feeling of unfairness is something I've never forgotten. So, when I became a mother, I vowed never to repeat the same mistake. My husband, though usually quiet, would always say when it came to the children, both children are my heart and soul. I can't favor one over the other. If I did, I wouldn't be able to sleep. Although our family wasn't well off and we lived frugally, we never let the children feel that one got more or less than the other, always worrying they might feel neglected. Back then, we firmly believed that as long as parents treated their children fairly, the children would naturally treat us equally when they grew up. However, reality soon made us realize that fairness isn't a debt that can be settled immediately. Looking back, we were truly naive. But the reality of life is that no matter how hard parents try to be fair, the way children treat their parents when they grow up is constrained by their respective living environments and choices. When a mother realized this, she deeply understood that fairness isn't just a balanced equation. It also requires time, environment, choices, and the complex emotional bonds of life. When the son turned 30, he started dating a girl, and after a little over a year, they decided to marry. At the time, we happened to have some savings. Without hesitation, my husband and I took out all the money we had painstakingly saved over the years to help our son pay the down payment for the wedding house. The wedding was organized by the bride's family, but we also tried our best to be respectful, paying for the banquet, giving betrothal gifts, buying appliances and furniture, and so on. Just the cash expenses alone amounted to nearly $1 million. At the time, I secretly resolved that when our daughter got married, I would definitely give her the same level of support. My husband and I agreed that there should be no difference between the two children when it came to marriage. We had to be fair in our hearts and not let anyone think we were biased. However, less than 3 months after the wedding, Our daughter brought her boyfriend home and announced that she was pregnant and needed to get married quickly. I panicked, not because I disliked the young man, but because we simply didn't have the money to prepare a wedding house for her. Our hard-earned savings were already gone, and even our emergency funds had been spent. Our daughter sensed our difficulty and said the wedding could be simple, without extravagance. But how could I possibly agree to that? My son's wedding had been grand and lavish. How could my daughter's be rushed and shabby? So, I gritted my teeth and borrowed money from relatives and friends, finally managing to scrape together over $300,000. Following the standards set by her brother's wedding, we bought furniture and appliances, and in the end, we also gave her a $200,000 red envelope as startup funds for her new marriage. During that time, I often lay awake at night, not because I regretted the money, but because I felt guilty, thinking I should have prepared for her earlier. It was all my oversight. On the day of the wedding, as I watched my daughter walk out of our home in her wedding dress, I couldn't help but shed tears. It wasn't out of reluctance. It was because I finally felt a sense of relief. I thought to myself, this is fair now, each got the same. I felt I had done nothing to be ashamed of. Back then, my husband and I were so naive, believing that as long as we set the same starting point, our children would naturally care for and look after us equally when they grew up. However, we overlooked one fact. Life isn't a math problem. Giving the same things doesn't mean you'll receive the same in return. At the time, we didn't yet realize that this seemingly fair effort was ultimately just a one-man show we put on for ourselves. After the children started their own families and careers, my husband's and my life gradually settled into peace. We lived in a small old apartment. Though not spacious, it was just right for the two of us. On ordinary days, I would go to the market to buy groceries, and my husband would do the laundry at home. Our life was simple but stable. We didn't ask for much, just an ordinary and peaceful life. We didn't want to disturb our children. They had their own work and lives. Unless it was an emergency, they rarely called. We always felt that if the children could visit us occasionally, that would be our greatest happiness. If they were too busy, it was fine. We could take care of ourselves. Many of the aunties in our neighborhood often complained that their daughters-in-law didn't visit them or would nag in group chats for their daughters to send photos. Honestly, I never envied or resented them. I always felt that the older you get, the more you must learn not to expect too much. Waiting for your children, waiting for a phone call, waiting for care, all of these are risks. When I went to the market, I always took the same familiar routes, knowing which stalls had cheap vegetables and which shop had fresh tofu. Occasionally, if I got a good deal, like a bunch of greens for just 10 yuan, I would happily tell my husband, today's luck was great. I rarely asked others to help me carry heavy things. Even when I returned from grocery shopping, I would force myself to climb the stairs, believing that this would keep my body from deteriorating. However, as I aged, some things were truly beyond my control. One day, while shopping at the market, the weather was a bit stuffy, and I didn't notice the slippery sweet potato peel on the ground. My foot slipped, and I fell hard. In that instant, I didn't even have time to cry out. After hitting the ground, the intense pain left me unable to move. Passers-by quickly called an ambulance, and I was in so much pain that my vision nearly went black. During this time of illness, the mother reached out to her children for help for the first time. She called her son, who quickly arrived at the hospital with fruits and flowers, bringing her comfort. In the evening, her daughter-in-law brought a bowl of pork rib soup she had personally prepared. As the mother drank it, she felt warmth and care. However, her daughter didn't visit until that night. She explained that she could only come after finishing dinner. The mother felt a bit disappointed. Though she knew her daughter wasn't indifferent, she still couldn't help feeling sad. The mother began to reflect. When she had prepared the weddings and dowries for her children, had she truly expected equal returns? She started to realize that there were many uncontrollable factors in reality, and these factors directly influenced her expectations and her children's responses. What disappointed the mother even more was that her daughter didn't offer to let her stay at her home. Her son-in-law also frankly admitted that their home was too small and it would be inconvenient to take care of her. Hearing this, the the mother felt a pang of sadness. She knew her daughter wasn't unwilling to care for her. It was just that her living conditions made it impossible to make that decision. After experiencing all this, the mother decided to stay at her son's home first and then go to her daughter's after recovering. She understood that although she had done a lot for her children, life wasn't an equal exchange. Often, the returns were not entirely within the parents' control. After deciding to stay at her son's home, the mother gradually recovered, but she noticed subtle changes in her mood. The self-esteem that had once allowed her to live independently, without relying too much on her children, seemed to have collapsed overnight. In the past, she had always prioritized caring for her children above all else, but now she had to depend on others, and this dependence made her feel uneasy and uncomfortable. Living at her son's home, although her son and daughter-in-law did their best to care for her, the mother still felt somewhat out of place. After work each day, her daughter-in-law would prepare soup for her and help her wash, even though she often looked exhausted. She would always smile and say, "It's okay, Mom. I'm happy to do this." Such warm words and actions brought the mother some comfort. She realized her son had grown up and become the pillar of her life. He was no longer the mischievous child who had caused her worry in the past. Yet, despite this, the mother couldn't help thinking about her daughter. In her heart, her daughter was also the one who had brought her warmth since childhood. Whenever her daughter was sick or faced difficulties as a child, the mother had always been the first to help. Back then, the mother had believed her daughter would care for her just like her son when she grew old. However, reality dealt her a heavy blow. Her daughter didn't show the level of concern the mother had expected. Though she did visit, it was always rushed. The mother understood that her daughter wasn't uncaring. It was just that life's pressures had left her with little energy to spare. Her daughter had her own family, a husband and children to care for, and her role as a wife and mother was undoubtedly more complex. Sometimes, the mother would notice the anxious look on her daughter's face and knew she didn't want her to feel neglected, but she was powerless to change things. During her stay at her son's home, the mother went through much self-reflection. She began to understand that the idealized fairness she had pursued in the past didn't always yield equal returns. She had always believed that as long as she fulfilled her duty of fairness, her children would treat her equally when they grew up. However, true returns didn't come from fair exchanges. They were determined by a complex interplay of emotions and practical circumstances. One day, her son took her for a walk. On the way, the mother saw an elderly couple holding hands as they strolled. Their hands were tightly clasped, and though their steps were slow, they moved with mutual understanding. The mother suddenly felt a lump in her throat. She remembered how she and her husband had once walked hand in hand through difficult times when they were young. Now they were old, their bodies frail. What had once been a strong support had become fragile. She knew she and her husband could no longer shoulder heavy responsibilities. The future would depend on their children. It was then that the mother truly realized life is not a fair transaction. Despite all the sacrifices she and her husband had made for their children, the care they received in return, especially when they needed it most, was still limited by many factors. The mother understood that whether children could care for their parents depended not only on their love, but also on their life circumstances, marital relationships, and roles within their own families. As time passed, the mother's leg gradually healed, and she could finally walk on her own. The care her son and daughter-in-law provided during her recovery filled her with gratitude. She also realized that despite their busy lives and work, they had prioritized her and their family, offering meticulous care. This warmth made her see her situation more clearly. Even so, the mother couldn't forget certain moments. For example, her daughter's delayed visit at the hospital or her son-in-law's remark, "Our house is small. It might not be comfortable." Though these words weren't meant to hurt, they pierced her heart. She knew her daughter still loved her, but her daughter's identity had changed. In her own home, the daughter was no longer the decision-maker, but someone bound by her husband's and children's needs. She wanted to care for her mother, but couldn't alter the family dynamics. This forced the mother to re-examine her own approach to parenting. She began to see that raising children was never a ledger of equal exchanges. In her efforts to give equally, she had perhaps overlooked that as children grow, their lives diverge from their parents' early expectations. The relationship between parents and children isn't just emotional dependence. It's a complex web of living conditions, family responsibilities, and societal roles. After 2 months, the mother regained most of her strength and decided to return to her own home. As they parted, her son personally accompanied her to the station, urging her to take care and assuring her she could reach out anytime. Watching her son and daughter-in-law walk away, the mother felt an indescribable warmth. Though some things couldn't be changed, she knew she had received the best care possible at her son's home. She finally understood that some rewards in life cannot be bought with material things or efforts alone. They accumulate over time, shaped by circumstances and seemingly insignificant details. After returning to her small apartment, the mother's life gradually settled back into peace. But she knew she would no longer cling to fairness. She had learned to accept reality. For this mother, differences in life didn't mean unequal love, but shifts in time and roles. She realized that regardless of how her son or daughter acted, she still felt their love and care. Every family relationship is unique due to different choices and circumstances, but ultimately, the bonds of kinship remain unbroken. Through this experience, the mother also learned one truth. No matter what, no act of love or sacrifice in this journey is wasted. She was grateful for her son's courage and sense of responsibility, and she came to understand her daughter's helplessness and struggles. Everyone in a family does their best to support and care for one another. This sentiment, no matter how circumstances change, remains constant. This mother's story is not just her own. It reflects the challenges many may face in old age. We might all experience a moment when we confront the unavoidable gaps in familial bonds. These gaps don't stem from a lack of love, but from differences in identity, roles, and responsibilities. It is these differences that make family relationships both complex and worthy of deep reflection. Finally, this story reminds us that when facing the trials of aging, we should look beyond the surface. We must strive to understand each family member's role and situation, offering genuine empathy. This connection is the most vital bond in any family. Thank you for watching this episode. Until next time,